Meant short. So again, I'm Louis Malizia. I'm Corporate Governance Director at SOC Investment Group, filling in for Meredith Benton of Whistle Stop, who sends her regrets but is facing connectivity difficulties. SOC Investment Group works with pension funds sponsored by unions affiliated with the Strategic Organizing Center, a coalition of unions representing more than 2 million members, to enhance long-term shareholder returns through active ownership. Members of the SOC affiliates participate in Taft-Hartley plans with over 250 billion in assets under management. Today's webinar focuses on investors' expectations that portfolio companies establish and disclose effective policies to respect fundamental labor rights. This conversation is timed against Delta Airlines' upcoming annual investor meeting on Thursday, June 20th, 2024. Prior to this meeting, Delta's investors will have the ability to vote on a shareholder proposal put forth by Amalgamated Bank, which requests that Delta's board adopt and disclose a non-interference policy upholding the rights to freedom of association and collective bargaining in its operations, as reflected in the International Labor Organization's Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. For those unfamiliar with this process, a shareholder proposal is a 500-word request that a shareholder in a company makes of the board of directors of that company. If successful negotiations are not had leading to the shareholders' concerns being met, then this 500-word request is printed on a proxy ballot, which is then sent to all investors of the company. The investors vote for or against the request made, alongside other more bureaucratic questions about who the board members should be and ratifying the firm's accountant. Whatever the vote tally ends up being, it is non-binding, meaning a vote over 50% doesn't obligate the company to make changes, but it allows the investor to make the request and the company to get a sense of whether other investors' concerns about the topic area exist. We'll have 4 speakers today to provide context to this moment in time and why investors might be concerned about Delta's current relationship with its employees and labor. We will hear first from Lindsay Fritz, Vice President, Corporate Social Responsibility Officer of the Amalgamated Bank, then from Delta Airlines workers, Michael Behrman, who is a flight attendant on the steering committee for the Association of Flight Attendants. He will be followed by ramp workers organizing with the International Association of Machinists, including Pat Gores, Julius High, and Gamli Apia. Questions can be submitted through the Q&A, and we will do our best to respond to them in the half hour of this session. Please note that the webinar is being recorded once again. So now I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay to describe the proposal and what pushed Amalgamated to file at Delta. Lindsay?
First, thank you to the SOC Investment Group for hosting the webinar, to Louis specifically for stepping in to moderate, and to Michael Behrman, Julius High, Pat Gores, and Gamli Apia for their bravery and commitment to their colleagues and passengers. My name is Lindsay Fritz, and I am a Corporate Social Responsibility Officer at Amalgamated Bank. Amalgamated Bank filed this proposal at Delta on behalf of our Longview funds. The Longview funds participate in shareholder advocacy because we believe good governance leads to long-term shareholder value. As investors, we believe management should have a good working relationship with workers, and there's a strong investor case for management to provide workers with a safe working environment and to support workers' fundamental rights to freedom of association and collective bargaining. Amalgamated Bank's proposal requests management adopt a non-interference and collective bargaining policy that conforms with international standards. The policy would define the company's commitment to respect freedom of association and collective bargaining and offers practical guidance for compliance. Around the world, freedom of association, collective bargaining, and a safe and healthy working environment are recognized as human rights under several international conventions, including the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and the International Labor Organization, or ILO, Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. A comprehensive labor policy will help Delta operationalize its commitments to international labor rights standards. Delta's board states in opposition that the proponent requests Delta's board adopt a policy based on international standards that are not applicable to 97% of its employees. However, more than 25% of Delta's revenue is international, and the company is pursuing future international growth, so it should conform to international standards. Delta also appears to be lagging its peers in its refusal to commit to international labor rights standards. Southwest Airlines, United Airlines, American Airlines, and JetBlue have all pledged to respect labor rights as laid out by the ILO. In addition, 146 members of Congress have sent a letter to Delta urging it to stop its anti-union practices. These members of Congress called for Delta to adopt a neutrality agreement to ensure a fair and unbiased union organizing campaign, the same ask outlined in this proposal. The representatives stated that adopting a neutrality agreement is the bare minimum that Delta should meet in respecting workers' rights and to comply with the Railway Labor Act's directive to not interfere, influence, or coerce its employees in their choice of representative. Neutrality does not mean employers cannot communicate with employees. Communications, however, should not interfere with freedom of association by containing threats of negative consequences if workers choose union representation. Delta's communications to its employees around unions have historically not met this non-interference or neutrality standard. Delta's ability to attract and retain employees may also benefit from a more positive union relationship. There are indications that a significant number of current employees are dissatisfied at Delta. The company shared that 78% of employees gave Delta a positive rating, but this implies the inverse, that close to a quarter of employees did not provide a positive rating. Delta operates in a sector where human rights policies and unionization is the norm. This is not an accident or coincidence. It is because the transportation sector is a sector with clear operational and safety issues to manage and is highly dependent on a skilled workforce. Respecting worker rights to freely associate, bargain collectively, and work in a safe and healthy environment has been shown to have positive effects for both workers and companies and may help investors secure more stable returns in challenging environments. Independent research has shown that the presence of unions correlates positively with low turnover, improved diversity, investment in training, and low levels of legal and regulatory violations. We hope investors join us in supporting this proposal. I now pass the floor back to Louis to introduce the workers and discuss the specific issues they have faced at the company.
Thank you, Lindsay, for providing that investor case as to why this shareholder proposal could have lasting positive impacts on Delta, its employees, and its investors. And for kind of a first-person point of view on the issues facing Delta workers, I'm going to first turn it over to Michael Behrman, flight attendant, and who's organizing a union with the Association of Flight Attendants, and he's on the steering committee. Michael?
Thanks, Louis. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Behrman. I'm a Detroit-based Delta Airlines flight attendant. I've been flying for 8 months, have been off probation for only 3 months. And I proudly serve on the Delta Association of Flight Attendants National Steering Committee, as well as the Detroit Core Committee. I represent thousands of Delta flight attendants based in Detroit and nearly 10,000 junior Delta flight attendants who have been hired since 2020. I joined the Delta AFA campaign soon after graduating training because of my personal experience and my other coworkers' experiences with a lack of clear, transparent, and consistent work rules. Only a couple weeks after flying, I came down with a fever during a 3-day trip. And during the trip, I became so congested I couldn't hear anything, even on the ground. Every takeoff and landing made it worse. And a crew member told me that it was dangerous to fly with ear pressure. You could lose your hearing permanently. But after reviewing Delta's work rules and policies, I failed to find a clear sick policy, especially on our probationary period. So I continued to work for 3 more days until I couldn't anymore. I called out sick, and luckily my manager was understanding, but unfortunately it was not the same for several of my coworkers who graduated with me. One of my coworkers' probationary periods was extended for 3 months after 1 sick call out. My other coworkers called out several times without repercussions. The lack of consistent and clear sick policy forces thousands of flight attendants, especially junior flight attendants, to work sick, risking the health of our fellow crew and passengers. Junior flight attendants are especially susceptible to viruses as we are newly exposed to thousands of people every day at work in a small enclosed space. I became frustrated. Why are so many of us punished for something that's truly beyond our control? I quickly realized we need a legally binding, clear, and consistently applied work rules. In other words, we needed a contract. So that's when I signed my union authorization card and I joined our Delta AFA campaign. And as I became more active in our union campaign, I realized and became more aware of Delta management's anti-union strategy. In fact, I realized the anti-union tactics started way back in training, where we were pressured to attend explicitly anti-union meetings. In one of these meetings, a speaker told us to beware of union agitators at work. He used words like harassment to describe my coworkers' legally protected organizing activity. By setting an expectation that junior flight attendants will face harassment by union activists at the workplace, it causes significant workplace stress and creates a very hostile work environment. When I work with other junior flight attendants and they see my AFA pin, I notice there's sometimes a fear or hesitancy to speak with me, even about critical procedures during our flight. This is the direct result of Delta's anti-union campaign. It's essential that Delta Airlines flight attendants are able to freely choose representation, not only to make Delta a better place to work, but to ensure Delta maintains its strong safety record and financial security. In fact, the time, effort, and resources that Delta spends on its anti-union campaign could be better spent to make Delta a more efficient, safe, and profitable airline. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story, Michael. And it's important that we note that these issues, directly speak to the non-interference issues that Lindsay just alluded to on in her presentation. And now I'm going to pass it on to another work group that is also seeking union representation, ramp workers at Delta Airlines. And we're really fortunate today to have experienced ramp workers with us who are organizing with the International Association of Machinists. With us today are Pat Gores, Julius High, and Gamli Apia. I'm going to first turn it over to Pat.
Hi there.
We having difficulty with Pat's audio, maybe first.
There, am I coming through now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect time for my internet to lag. I've been a Delta worker for 8.5 years here in Minneapolis, all of which was as a baggage handler, started just as a part-time deal and really enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed the flexibility that came with the job and just kind of hung around. And the more I hung around, the more I started to pay attention and interact with people and just paid attention more. And a lot of the issues started to arise, and I became a lot more cognizant of it, of shifting workplace rules, policies that change at the drop of a hat with no real employee engagement. So that's roughly how I kind of got engaged in this. I had a friend invite me to a meeting and have just kind of been perpetually involved since for this drive. Something I want to bring up that Lindsay mentioned in a statement was where Delta claims that 78% of their employees give it a positive review. Well, our surveys for the ramp, cargo, and tower agents typically only get 20 to 25% engagement. So that is nowhere near an accurate reflection of employee sentiments, especially in our department. Some of the anti-union and lack of neutrality things that we've seen, particularly, I'll speak about management hosting meetings with employees. Minnesota recently passed a law that bans captive audience meetings, but our local management has continued to do them. They just get around it by saying, you know, in their second week of training, a station higher up will show up and say, if you want, you can leave, but no one's going to walk out when their station director or their new general manager walks into a meeting. So sure, they're following the letter of the law, but they're definitely breaking the spirit of the law. And they are threatening the loss of benefits, threatening harassment, much like what Michael was talking about, threatening the weird, you know, we as organizing employees are going to be tenacious and harassing and make workplaces uncomfortable. First off, any of the benefits that they've threatened that would be lost are locked in with contracts at the other carriers. I've read all the other contracts. Everything they threatened that we would lose is in those contracts. So we know that that is just a blatant misleading statement, or just a blatant lie. I'll just put it that way. As well as I've had new hire employees that eventually do sign cards with us flat out say that you are not like what we were warned about. So they've actually gone out and have actively start to tarnish our reputation before these employees enter the workspace. And at a personal level, that's extremely insulting, but I think that's extremely, they talk about damaging morale and workplace culture. Immediately pitting new hires against existing employees is extremely damaging to workplace culture. And they've also, when we had our 5% raise, they also brought in the 1 or 2 year employees to discuss with them the pay raise, and conveniently left out that Southwest Airlines pays more than us and that almost every step of the United's pay scale is higher than ours. And they only showed them selective pay scales to mislead them into thinking that we were the highest paid. Yeah, that's what I've got immediately.
Thanks so much, Pat. I'm gonna for sharing that, and really mirrors what we also heard from Michael about the company trying to create such dissonance between workers, and it's certainly lack of communication and a highly is what from an outsider would seem a very the wrong approach at a safety intense job such as an airline worker faces. So I'm going to also now pass it on to Julius. You can unmute Julius's mic.
Hi, good morning. How you guys doing? My name is Julius. I'm actually a ramp worker for Delta Airlines, MCO. I like to really mirror a lot what Mike and Pat had said before. My career path started a little different. I was actually in management at Southwest Airlines. I worked there for a little while, started my own business. I got back into aviation and got hired by Delta Airlines in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been in Orlando for about a year now. There's a lot of things, like I said, mirroring what Michael and Pat said. You have papers in the break room that's mysteriously handed out that says, "Hey, you guys don't need a union. We're gonna handle things faster and better than a union could do." You have basically being on the management side at Southwest and them having a union. You can tell that Delta Airlines really needs a union. The work rules that are in place are it's detrimental that we follow those rules, because safety is so concerning at all airlines, not just Delta, but all airlines. You have things when you enter the break room. Don't sign it, don't risk it. There's a lot of things that when you go and talk to your coworkers about, you know, work rules, you know, they're just not following it. And you know, we basically can't hold anybody accountable because there's no, you know, no protection for us. It's getting these cards to be signed is basically like, it's like we're having to hide behind closed doors and, you know, watch and see if you know, anybody in management is around, just so these guys are, you know, able to just even sign a card that says, hey, maybe we can get representation if we get enough of these cards signed. It's it's very hard. Again, you know, even with me pushing, you know, to be trying to organize Orlando, I get a lot of things. Hey, Julie, you know, you'll never get in management here. You know, you're gonna be blackballed. You know, I've heard crazy rumors that if, you know, we get a union, we lose our flight privileges. It just goes on and on. Anything to scare, that's what they put out. And you know, they put it out to the junior agents. Along with that, I've realized that there's a lot of senior agents as well. And you know, I try to ask them, where did they get this information from? And you know, they just say, hey, you know, we've had meetings about this already, and we just don't feel comfortable. They don't even want to talk to you about it on the clock, basically. So it's a lot of fear, a lot of, you know, a lot of harassment, and I'm just glad that these guys, Michael, Pat, Yamley, and me and myself, you know, I'm just glad that, you know, we're taking that X on our back just to, you know, hopefully get some representation for all parties that's involved.
Thank you, Julius, for your courage of speaking out on an issue that obviously the company is it's a risk given the company's behavior. And now our final panelist is Gamali Apia from Atlanta. Gamali.
Yes, hey, how you doing? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Gamli Apia. I'm a ramp agent in Atlanta. I've been in Atlanta for about 5 years. Started off as a seasonal employee, and I'm on the Atlanta organizing committee, working with the International Association of Machinists so that we can have union representation for our work group, Ramp, Cargo, and Tower. We need a union. I kind of have an interesting background. My background was actually in IT, but I also worked at the Ramp before Delta and UPS, which was unionized. So when I started with Delta 5 years ago, I saw that there was a need for us to have a union because it's just night and day when you look at the safety. Like Pat and Julius and Michael have said, the culture at Delta in our work group is a culture of fear. And it's so woven into the culture of Delta that when we try to exercise our rights, our federal rights, it's a federal right to, you know, have a union, to organize a union. Our coworkers won't even talk to us. As Lindsay had said, over 146 members of Congress sent a letter to Delta Ed Bastian specifically asking them to adopt a policy of neutrality, and that be the bare minimum. And but that letter came out from our coworkers actually going to Capitol Hill and speaking with the Congressional Labor Caucus. So our coworkers, flight attendants, ramp agents, and other work groups, and they spoke to the Congressional Labor Caucus. And they were just telling them about what regularly goes on at Delta, and they were shocked, surprised, because Delta says one thing publicly, but does something else, behind closed doors. So it's a culture of fear and intimidation. So that's what caused that letter from the congressman from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. And I think that's amazing because, I mean, in this day and age with politics being so divisive, you rarely see Democrats and Republicans come together in the same message. So, but they sent a letter to Delta, and Delta pretty much gave a non-response. So, that kind of tells you what they want to do. The other thing is the website that they host, the, One Future, One Delta. And I would ask all the shareholders and members on this call to go to the website and look at the videos that they have there. And at the end of the video, it says, "Don't risk it, don't sign it." So, I mean, when you see that in the literature that's in the break room, on the newsstand, on the fly stand, and on the bottom of the literature, it says, "Don't risk it, don't sign it." What is it? I mean, what is it telling you not to sign? It's basically saying don't sign an A card, which is our federal rights. I mean, it says it on the bottom of the card. It's your federal right to sign a card. And all an A card or an authorization card does, it allows us to get to an election so that we can vote. So if they're putting out this message, don't risk it, don't sign it, I mean, to me, that's a clear violation. You're basically telling the worst, don't even sign a card. And, on that website, One Future, One Delta, they do a lot of patting on the back of how great a place Delta is to work. And my thing is, if Delta is such a great place to work, you wouldn't have to convince your employees, and you wouldn't encourage your employees not to sign an authorization card. If it was such a great place to work and they're treating us so well and there wasn't any issues, they would welcome an election, and they would adopt a neutrality policy. And so I think I'm so proud of Amalgamated Bank introducing this proposal. I know they introduced the proposal last year and it wasn't successful, but I'm confident this year that it will pass. And I'm proud of them doing that because we need it. We're just trying to exercise our federal rights. We're not asking for anything out of the ordinary. So if Delta respect its workers' rights to choose whether they want to be represented by a union, like they often say to the press and the public, they need to put some action behind it. I think they should adopt this neutrality policy and let the chips fall where they may. If we get to a vote and the workers voted in, that's their choice. If we voted down, that's their choice. But Delta should not, spend money, host websites, do these captive audience meetings, threaten benefits, to the point that, people don't even want to talk to you, or, it's just not necessary.
I want to thank Gamali, Julius, Michael, and Pat for coming forth with their stories and of why we feel that there's a clear need for a non-interference policy at this company, and we urge your support to our fellow investors when it comes to June 20th and the company's annual meeting. And I just, before ending, I just wanted to give Lindsay a chance if there's any other issues regarding the proposal she'd like to mention.
I think that we're in a moment that the public really supports unions. The AFL-CIO found that 71% of Americans support unions, with that support increasing to 88% of voters under 30. So I think it's time for the company to wake up and support these workers, and it has a myriad of benefits that we've already discussed. So thank you all.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks to all everyone who joined us today. A big thank you to our panelists, and please once again urge your support on at the annual meeting on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.